Hello, everybody.
Oh, hello.
Yeah. Today we are going to be kicking off some of our, POG 2020 coverage, so to speak. So I'm switching gears. So I've done a lot of Darkness Ablaze stuff already. All of that Darkness Ablaze stuff was post-rotation, meaning, everything from team up onwards. But for the next couple of weeks leading into that Atlas POG Championships, if you don't know what that is, I'll put a link to the video I did about that in the description. But basically, it's an online global championship that's being organized by a bunch of awesome people. It's unofficial, but yeah. So the difference, though, is that format is going to be Ultra Prism through Darkness Ablaze. So it's kind of its own unique format for a big tournament. And yeah, we are going to start building decks and doing some testing and stuff like that for that format. I'm not entirely sure how many videos of me testing I'm going to do. I might try to stream myself doing some testing of this format, but if you really want to see videos, it'll all be on Tabletop Simulator. I put all my cards away and everything for now, and I don't want to break them out and all the proxies and everything at the moment just to do tabletop. As much as I love it, Tabletop Simulator for now is just going to be easier. So everything you're going to see, deck profiles, etc., for the next few weeks are going to be Tabletop Simulator specifically. Little different aesthetic, but so be it for the next few weeks. I figured it's such a small format time-wise that it didn't make sense for me to really stress too much about getting all the proxies and cards. Anyways, without further ado, we're going to be talking today about Vikavolt. Vikavolt is a deck that I have personally been very excited about, both in post-rotation and for this format in particular. So we're going to talk about Vikavolt, and we're going to talk about two different versions. So we're going to get two versions of Vikavolt in one video. The first version is a very linear, straightforward version of Vikavolt. And then the second version is a slightly different version of Vikavolt that did, I think, fairly well at a tournament in Japan. And then Danny Altavilla posted his initial 50 some odd cards of a list. So I just sort of finished that off and made some tweaks. But yeah, we can just jump into the first version. All right, so this here is the linear version of Vikavolt that I am currently working with. I'm sure there's things that you could change and edit from this. I know Luke from Celios also has a version that has Jirachi. I am not running any Jirachi in this to make space for other stuff. But let's just sort of go over the list real quick. So what you see here is I have four of these Vikavolts. I have four because I definitely want to try to find it turn one. Doesn't always happen, but if I start with it, that's great. Yeah, that's really the reason. On top of those four Vikavolt, now if you don't know Vikavolt, its first attack, Paralyzing Bolt, does 50, and your opponent can't play trainer item cards from their hand. Huge deal. The second attack does 190, and you discard 2 energy from Vikavolt. So that's a really good finishing attack. And I think the thing that I'm going to be practicing is figuring out when it makes sense to stretch for that 190 to take knockouts versus just keeping them in item lock, right? Because I think that's a challenge with this deck, is there is some skill in knowing when to let them out of item lock so that you can take prizes. It's always a little challenging. But we have 4 of those. And in terms of other attackers, if you will, let me actually make sure I have the right number of cards. I think so. We also have Zapdos here. We have 1 Zapdos. This is really for Decidueye. It can also help in certain matchups where you don't want to give up a 2-prizer. But Zapdos particularly for Decidueye. Now it does have some challenges with switching mechanics that you have to pull off, but between the switches and the Zero Aura IFAR, I think it's very doable. We also have 1 Raichu and a Alolan Raichu for its first attack mainly, which paralyzes and does 160 if it comes from the bench. It also has a GX attack that can go up to 250. So definitely an option there if you're buying time. So those are our 2 alternate attackers. Beyond that, we have 2 Dedennes, just because that's pretty standard, making sure that you draw a lot of cards. I would love to just have 1, but I think 2 is probably safer. We have Tapu Koko Prism, which allows you to get energy from your discard to 2 benched Pokemon. And then we have 1 Zero Aura. Zero Aura, I'm still very iffy about. The free retreat's nice, but still get kind of like iffy of like, is their aura really useful in this deck or not? I don't know. It's kind of up to you, personal preference, test with it, see how you feel. But that's the Pokemon line. As like I said, we're not running, I really wanted to run Boltund, but maybe Raichu is just better. I think it's really up in the air in my opinion. Also, Tapu Koko V is another good option. It's free retreat. So a couple of other options for you to think about. Now, in terms of the supporter line, we have 4 Marnies because you really want to keep disrupting your opponent's hand. What I realized when I first built this deck is I had like Volkner and Research and stuff like that to like see a lot of cards, which is great. But the problem was my opponent was able to build up these massive hands. And then when I let them out of item lock, they went nuts, right? And that would potentially cost me the game. So I think with Vikavolt, Marnie is very powerful. So I would always have Marnie around if you can in these decks. I like a 4 count because it's your best draw supporter. And on top of that, if you do have to let them out of item lock, you can let them build up that huge hand and then Marnie them and then let them out of item lock, and hopefully they don't have the same resources in hand that they had before. So we got 4 Marnies. We're also playing 3 Cynthia and Caitlins. Now this is just good because you can get back a variety of cards throughout the game. You can get back more Marnies. You can get back Boss's Orders that you might need to ditch early game. You can get back Guzma and Halas. Like, lots of options there. So it also draws you 3 cards. All pretty good things. I don't really know of better off supporters off the top of my head, but I like Cynthia and Caitlin. Outside of Cynthia and Caitlin, we have 2 Guzma Halas. Guzma and Hala is going to be really good at getting us Thunder Mountain, at getting us the Toughness Cape, and at getting us our Speed Lightning Energy. Is this, did I go down to 3 on this? I might have. Yeah. But yeah, good at getting us all of those different things. Apologies if like there's one card off. Sometimes it's hard when you're messing with this. I don't want to like reshuffle the count. But anyways, 2 Guzma Halas. And then we have 1 Balelba and Bryson Man. Now this is for the Eternatus matchup specifically. If you're playing against Eternatus, once they get set up and have a big bench, they're just going to be swinging for 270 every turn. That's not good for you. So you need something like Balelba and Bryson Man to get their bench size back down to a number that's not going to hit you so hard. So we have 1 of those in here. And finally, just 2 Boss's Orders. Between the Cynthia and Caitlins, 2 Boss's Orders, plenty of Gust. You can bring things up, stall your opponent out if they are running out of energy. They can't use switches, etc. So Boss's Order Gust is very good in this deck. Now, in terms of Pokemon search, pretty standard. You got 4 Quick Balls, and we also have 2 of the tag calls on the right there as well. We also have 4 Crushing Hammers. Crushing Hammers, I think, is critical in this deck as well. Hopefully you can hit those heads. But once you are disrupting your opponent from using items, then you can get rid of their energy. All of a sudden, it becomes very difficult for them to actually even attack into you. We have 2 Toughness Capes. Toughness Cape gives your non-GX basics plus 50 HP. So that is particularly good for Vikavolt V in a variety of matchups. But it also could be used on Zapdos, giving it 160, which is better against Decidueye, because Decidueye can put 2 damage counters on it and then hit it for 90, and then it's donezo. So Toughness Cape in that matchup might be beneficial. We got 4 E-Powers because that does not rotate, which is great. And then I've decided to run 4 Turbo Patches in this deck. Turbo Patch is a card that I think some people maybe don't think it's necessary. It may not be. I do like it though, because it gives me so many options to find turn 1 item lock. So what you could do is if you start Vikavolt and you can get 1 energy into discard, you could try to Turbo Patch for attachment and the second energy. The second option is using Tapu Koko Prism and a switch. The third option is using Thunder Mountain. So really what you're looking at here is 3 different ways. The only other cards that I could maybe see finding room for are energy switches. That way you could Tapu Koko to the bench and then energy switch to the active, right? So that's maybe something you play around with, is can you find space for an energy switch or 2 in here as just even more outs to that turn 1 item lock. But yeah, that's why I'm playing the Turbo Patch, because you can attach it to a non-GX Pokemon anywhere. Doesn't have to be on the bench. So We're also running a tool scrapper because it's really good at getting rid of skateboards or air balloons or, toughness capes on your opponent. We have one great catcher because Dedenne is still being played. You can bring those up. One reset stamp, between 1 stamp and 4 Marnie. That just feels about right. In terms of these stadiums, the stadiums that we are running in this version, we're running Run Thunder Mountain, obviously, but I'm also running One Wondrous Labyrinth. A really amazing situation is if you, and this is like both in the mirror with Vikavolt and in a variety of different decks, once you get set up, you can throw Wondrous Lab down and you're fine. Or if you get really aggressive and you can get Wondrous Labyrinth out turn 1, and you can get 3 energy onto a Vikavolt, which is very possible between Turbo Patch, Attachment for Turn, Tapu Koko. So if you can manage that, then even in the mirror, you can stop yourself from getting item locked on the following turn. So you just kind of buy yourself more time. That's why I like Labyrinth in this deck. Then in terms of the energy count, we have 2 switches as well, just 2 straight switches. We have 3 of the Speed Lightning energies. Seems good. I thought there were 4 in here. Maybe there should be. I don't know. Count. Maybe put in a 4th. Then we have 8 of the Lightning energy, just basic, because you can only attach basic Lightning with Turbo Patch or Tapu Koko. So more of those is something I would prefer in this deck with all these Turbo Patches. So that is the linear Vikavolt V. And now we are just gonna, whoa. Okay, yeah, I know, tabletop simulator nonsense. We're gonna go over to the other version of Vikavolt V, which is the version that is like Sleepy Vikavolt. So this is based off of an initial list that Danny Altavilla shared on his Twitter. I've obviously made some changes to it, but the core of it is still roughly there. The whole point with this deck is that it's not just item lock, but you can also put your opponent to sleep with this Mareep. So Mareep has an ability, Fluffy Pillow, which once a turn, if it's in the active, you can leave your opponent's Pokemon asleep. So the whole point here is you get this into the active, and then you retreat it into Vikavolt. Hopefully they stay asleep. The way that we make sure that they stay asleep are with cards like Slumbering Forest, which makes your opponent flip 2 coins between turns and hit 2 heads in order to wake up. So between Mareep keeping you asleep with Slumbering Forest and item lock not being able to use switch or place down any escape boards, that can be very powerful. Now, the main differences there are, we play Mareeps. We also play an Absol to trap people in the active for a little bit longer, and a Marshadow so that we are not bothered by some chaotic swells. Crobat as well. We only run 3 Vikavolt Vs here. I could see making room for a 4th just to make sure that you start it. Supporter line is similar. The main differences with the supporter line are we have 2 Team Yell Grunts because this, Vikavolt in general, you just have a lot of time. Once you get your opponent into item lock, you could also do things like Team Yell Grunt, put them back a turn again on their attachment for turn, which could be huge. So we have a couple of Team Yell Grunts, and then we have a Lusamine. Now, Lusamine is good at getting back supporters. You can also get back your stadiums. So if your opponent is trying to bump all of these Slumbering Forests, you can Lusamine, get them back, put them back to sleep, just make their day very, very difficult. So that combo is very nice. It's very disruptive, this deck, compared to the linear version. Outside of that, everything is pretty much the same. We have a U-turn board in here for the Mareep in particular. Now, I also run 4 switches so you can get some switch shenanigans in. I could see putting in an air balloon over a U-turn board if you think a lot of opponents are going to be playing Absol. I'm less concerned about that usually because there's going to be a lot of VMAXs, and Absol doesn't do anything to VMAXs, right? So I'm going for the U-turn board so I can run fewer item cards in general, because U-turn board goes back to hand if it was going to be discarded. So I like U-turn board for that reason. But there's obviously good reasons to play Air Balloon if you think a lot of Absol might be played. We also run the Scrapper to get rid of skateboards, etc. In terms of the energy count, we have less basic energy, just 6 here, because we're not running any of those turbo patches. Only 2 speed lightnings to make room for stuff. And then we have 2 capture energy, which is very good in the early game-ish if you need to attach it to a Vikavolt or something, and then bring out your Mareep or an Absol or Tapu Koko that way. So capture energy can be really good for that. But that is gonna do it. Those are two different Vikavolt decks, two very different ways to run them. I would personally say, I think the linear version feels more consistent. This version here, maybe you can edit it a little bit to be more consistent. You probably could. This version though is definitely more disruptive. And this version I think has a better mirror match. If you have a mirror with a non-sleepy Vikavolt, then putting them to sleep so they can't item lock you for a turn can be massive. So that's one I would say, like, if you think Vikavolt's going to be played a lot, this might be a version that beats other Vikavolts a little bit better. Anyways, thank you all so much for watching. Check out the stream link in the description as well. Check out my Patreon if you want to support me. If you do support me at different levels, there are channels in Discord where I will be looking for people to test on Tabletop Sim with. But yeah, all of that is linked in the description. And thank you so much. Let me know what you think about these decks, and I'll catch you all in a future episode. Carpe Awesome.